What if I told you that many of the experts making decisions that affect your life have no real stake in the outcomes? Imagine a world where politicians could start wars without sending their own children to fight, where financial advisors could gamble with your life savings without risking a penny of their own, or where food safety regulators could approve questionable additives without ever having to consume them themselves. This isn't some dystopian fiction, it's the world we live in today, and it's all because of a crucial concept that's often overlooked: skin in the game. Welcome to CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf where we dive deep into the most impactful business books shaping industries and driving innovation. I'm your host, and today we're exploring a book that challenges the very foundations of how we think about risk, decision-making, and accountability in our modern world. The book is Skin in the Game: Hidden Asymmetries in Daily Life by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Now, if you're not familiar with Taleb, he's a former options trader turned philosopher and author, known for his incisive and often controversial takes on risk and uncertainty. He's the mind behind bestsellers like The Black Swan and Anti-Fragile, and with Skin in the Game, he's taking aim at what he sees as a fundamental flaw in our social and economic systems. But what exactly is skin in the game? At its core, it's a simple but powerful idea. Those who make decisions or take actions should bear the consequences of those choices. It's about having a personal stake in the outcome, about putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak. This concept might seem obvious, even common sense. After all, isn't this just basic accountability? But as Taleb argues throughout the book, it's a principle that's increasingly absent in many areas of our lives, from politics and finance to academia and beyond. And this absence, he contends, is at the root of many of our society's most pressing problems. Over the next half hour, we're going to unpack this idea and explore its implications. We'll look at how the lack of skin in the game creates hidden risks and perverse incentives in our world. We'll examine the asymmetries between risk and reward that shape our decisions. And we'll consider how time-tested wisdom, what Taleb calls the Lindy Effect, can guide us in navigating an uncertain world. So whether you're a business leader looking to build more resilient organizations, an investor trying to understand market dynamics, or simply someone interested in how the world really works, this episode is for you. Let's dive in and see what insights we can glean from skin in the game. Let's start by digging deeper into what Taleb means by skin in the game. It's more than just having a stake in the outcome. It's about a fundamental symmetry between risk and reward, between decision and consequence. To illustrate this, let's consider a tale of two business owners. On one side, we have Sarah, who runs a small local bakery. On the other, we have John, the CEO of a large multinational food corporation. Sarah, our local baker, has true skin in the game. Every decision she makes directly affects her livelihood. If she cuts corners on ingredients to save money, she risks losing customers and damaging her reputation. If she misjudges demand and makes too much bread, she eats the loss, literally and figuratively. Her personal finances are often intertwined with her business, and a major mistake could mean not just the failure of her bakery, but personal bankruptcy. Now contrast this with John, the CEO of the big food corporation. While he certainly has responsibilities, his personal risk is often limited. If he makes a bad decision that costs the company millions, he might lose his job, but he'll likely walk away with a generous severance package. If the company's products cause harm to consumers, it's the shareholders who bear the brunt of the lawsuits and reputational damage. John's personal wealth, accumulated through years of high salaries and bonuses, remains largely untouched. This difference in skin in the game leads to vastly different incentives and behaviors. Sarah is likely to be more cautious, more focused on long-term sustainability, and more attuned to the needs and feedback of her customers. John, on the other hand, might be tempted to take bigger risks, prioritize short-term profits over long-term stability, or overlook ethical concerns in pursuit of personal bonuses. Now, you might be thinking, but surely there are checks and balances in place for big corporations. Don't we have regulations to prevent abuse? And you'd be right, to an extent. But as Taleb argues, regulations are often an imperfect substitute for true skin in the game. They can be gamed, lobbied against, or simply ignored if the potential profits are high enough. Moreover, the lack of skin in the game doesn't just affect the decision-makers themselves, it creates ripple effects throughout the entire system. When people can reap rewards without bearing commensurate risks, it encourages reckless behavior and creates hidden fragilities in our economic and social structures. Think about the 2008 financial crisis. Many of the bankers and financial institutions that engaged in risky lending practices and complex financial engineering walked away relatively unscathed, while millions of ordinary people lost their homes and savings. This asymmetry between risk and reward, this lack of skin in the game, was a key factor in creating the conditions for the crisis. But the implications of skin in the game go far beyond the world of business and finance. Consider politics, for example. In ancient Rome, Taleb notes, generals and emperors often led their armies into battle personally. They quite literally put their lives on the line for their decisions. Compare this to modern warfare, where political leaders can declare war from the safety of their offices, their own children rarely serving on the front lines. Or think about the world of punditry and prediction. How often do we see experts on TV confidently making predictions about the economy, geopolitics, or technology trends? Yet how often are they held accountable when these predictions turn out to be wildly off the mark? They keep their positions, their prestige, and get invited back to make more predictions. They have no skin in the game. This lack of accountability, Taleb argues, doesn't just lead to bad decisions. It corrodes the very fabric of society. It erodes trust in institutions and experts. It creates a class of people who are insulated from the consequences of their actions, leading to what he calls the intellectuals yet idiots, people who make decisions for others without having to bear the costs of being wrong. So, what can we do about this? As individuals, we can start by being more aware of skin in the game in our own lives and decisions. When seeking advice or trusting others with important decisions, we should ask ourselves, does this person have skin in the game? Will they bear the consequences if things go wrong? For business leaders, it means thinking carefully about how to align incentives within your organization. How can you ensure that decision makers at all levels have a genuine stake in the long-term success of the company? And for society at large, it means pushing for structures and systems that enforce skin in the game. This could mean reforming corporate governance to tie executive compensation more closely to long-term performance. It could mean changing how we evaluate and reward experts and pundits, placing more emphasis on track record than credentials. Before we move on to our next key insight, I want you to take a moment and reflect on your own life. Where do you see a lack of skin in the game? It could be in your workplace, in the products or services you use, or in the institutions you interact with. How does this affect your decisions and behaviors? And more importantly, how might things be different if there was more genuine skin in the game? In our next segment, we'll delve deeper into one of the key mechanisms through which a lack of skin in the game manifests, the asymmetry between risk and reward. Now that we've established the importance of skin in the game, let's explore one of its most crucial aspects, the asymmetry between risk and reward. This concept is at the heart of many of the problems Taleb identifies in our modern world. To understand this, let's start with a story that Taleb refers to repeatedly in the book, the tale of Bob Rubin, former U.S. Treasury Secretary turned Citigroup executive. Rubin received over $120 million in compensation from Citigroup in the decade leading up to the 2008 financial crisis. When the bank faced near collapse and required a taxpayer bailout, Rubin faced no clawbacks of his earnings and suffered no major consequences. This, Taleb argues, is a perfect example of what he calls the Bob Rubin Trade. The Bob Rubin Trade is simple but insidious. It's a situation where someone gets the upside of their decisions, in Rubin's case, enormous bonuses, while transferring the downside to others, in this case, taxpayers and Citigroup shareholders. It's a heads I win, tails you lose scenario. This asymmetry creates perverse incentives. If you can reap big rewards when things go well but don't have to bear the costs when they go badly, you're incentivized to take bigger and bigger risks. After all, why not? You're not the one who will suffer if things go wrong. Now, you might be thinking, but surely this is just a problem in high finance, right? Wrong. The Bob Rubin trade is everywhere once you start looking for it. Consider the pharmaceutical industry. A company might rush a drug to market, reaping huge profits if it's successful. But if unforeseen side effects emerge years later, it's patients who bear the brunt of the harm. The company might face fines or lawsuits, but these are often just a cost of doing business, dwarfed by the profits already made. Or think about the world of startup founders and venture capitalists. A founder might take big risks with investor money, knowing that if the company fails, they personally have little to lose beyond their time invested. The investors bear most of the financial risk, while the founder gets invaluable experience and connections, even if the venture fails. Even in academia, we see this asymmetry. Researchers might push for adoption of their theories or findings, gaining prestige and career advancement if they're accepted. But if these ideas turn out to be wrong or harmful when applied in the real world, the researchers rarely face significant consequences. This asymmetry between risk and reward doesn't just create unfairness, it generates hidden risks that can threaten entire systems. When decision-makers are insulated from the negative consequences of their choices, they're more likely to overlook or underestimate potential downsides. This can lead to the build-up of hidden fragilities in our financial systems, our institutions, and our society as a whole. Taleb argues that this is one of the key factors behind many of the crises and collapses we've seen in recent history, from the 2008 financial crisis to the failure of large-scale social engineering projects. So, what's the solution? Taleb advocates for structures and systems that force decision-makers to have skin in the game, to bear both the positive and negative consequences of their choices. In finance, this might mean requiring bankers and financial institutions to have more of their own capital at risk. In government, it could involve tying politicians' pensions to the long-term outcomes of their policies. In business, it might involve structuring executive compensation so that leaders share in downside risks, not just upside potential. But it's not just about punitive measures. Taleb argues that skin in the game is also about honor and a sense of ethical responsibility. He points to traditional societies where leaders were expected to personally bear the consequences of their decisions, often literally leading their people into battle. This ethical dimension of skin in the game extends beyond formal structures. It's about fostering a culture where people take personal responsibility for their actions and decisions, where they're willing to stand behind their words with deeds. As you think about this in your own life and work, consider, where do you see asymmetries between risk and reward? How might these be creating hidden risks or perverse incentives? And most importantly, how can you ensure that you and those around you have genuine skin in the game in your decisions and actions? In our final segment, we'll explore another key concept from Taleb's book, the Lindy Effect, and how it relates to survival and decision-making in an uncertain world. As we've explored the importance of skin in the game and the dangers of asymmetry between risk and reward, you might be wondering, how can we navigate a world full of hidden risks and misaligned incentives? This brings us to our final key insight from Taleb's book, The Lindy Effect and its implications for survival and decision-making. The Lindy Effect, named after a New York deli where showbiz types would gather, is a fascinating concept. In essence, it states that the future life expectancy of some non-perishable things, like a technology or an idea, is proportional to their current age. In other words, the longer something has survived, the longer it's likely to continue surviving. This might seem counterintuitive at first. After all, don't things wear out over time? Doesn't everything have a natural lifespan? While this is true for living things and physical objects, Taleb argues that for certain categories of things, particularly ideas, technologies, and cultural practices, the opposite is often true. Let's illustrate this with an example. Consider two approaches to eating: the latest fad diet that's all over social media, and the traditional Mediterranean diet that's been around for centuries. The fad diet might seem exciting and promise quick results, but statistically, it's likely to fade away within a few years, replaced by the next hot trend. The Mediterranean diet, on the other hand, has stood the test of time. It's weathered countless food trends and dietary theories, and it's likely to still be around long after the current fad diet is forgotten. This is the Lindy Effect in action. The very fact that the Mediterranean diet has survived for so long suggests that it has some real benefits. Otherwise, it would have been abandoned long ago. Its longevity is a signal of its robustness and value. Taleb extends this concept beyond diets to all sorts of domains. Books that have been in print for decades are likely to remain in print longer than a book published last year. Technologies that have been in use for a long time are likely to continue being used longer than a new invention. Ideas that have persisted through centuries are likely to outlast the latest intellectual fad. But the Lindy Effect isn't just an interesting observation. It has profound implications for how we make decisions and navigate uncertainty. First, it suggests that there's wisdom in tradition and time-tested practices. While innovation is important, Taleb argues that we should be skeptical of new ideas that claim to completely overthrow established ways of doing things. The very fact that a practice or idea has survived for a long time suggests that it has some real value, even if we don't fully understand why. This doesn't mean we should never innovate or try new things, but it does suggest that we should be cautious about abandoning tried-and-true methods in favor of untested new approaches, especially in domains where the costs of failure are high. Second, the Lindy Effect provides a powerful heuristic for decision-making under uncertainty. In a complex world where we can't possibly have all the information, the age of a practice or idea can serve as a proxy for its robustness and value. For instance, if you're trying to decide between two investment strategies, one that's been used successfully for decades and another that's brand new but promises higher returns, the Lindy Effect would suggest favoring the older strategy. It's survived countless market conditions and economic shifts, which suggests it has real staying power. Third, the Lindy Effect ties back to our earlier discussions about skin in the game. Ideas, practices, and institutions that have stood the test of time have, by definition, had skin in the game. They've been exposed to real-world conditions and survived. This exposure to reality, this skin in the game, is what gives them their robustness. Consider the difference between theoretical knowledge from a textbook and practical wisdom gained from years of experience. The theoretical knowledge might seem impressive, but it hasn't been tested against reality. The practical wisdom, on the other hand, has survived countless real-world challenges. It has skin in the game and thus, according to the Lindy Effect, is likely to continue being valuable. This idea has huge implications for how we think about expertise and decision-making. It suggests that we should put more trust in practitioners with long track records than in theorists with impressive credentials but little practical experience. It suggests that in many domains, grandmother's wisdom might be more reliable than the latest findings from academia. Now, it's important to note that the Lindy effect isn't a hard and fast rule. New ideas and technologies do sometimes revolutionize fields and render old approaches obsolete. But Taleb argues that these cases are rarer than we think, and that we're often too quick to abandon time-tested approaches in favor of shiny new ideas. So how can we apply this insight in our own lives and decision-making? Here are a few suggestions. 1. When faced with a decision, consider the age of your options. All else being equal, favor approaches or ideas that have stood the test of time. 2. Be skeptical of claims that completely reject traditional wisdom, especially in domains where the costs of being wrong are high. 3. In your own field, strive to create work that's Lindy compatible, work that has a chance of standing the test of time rather than just capitalizing on current trends. 4. When seeking advice or expertise, pay attention to track records and real-world experience, not just credentials or theoretical knowledge. 5. In your personal life, consider the value of time-tested practices, whether it's in your diet, exercise routine, or relationships. These practices have survived for a reason. As we wrap up our discussion of the Lindy effect, I want you to reflect on your own life and work. What time-tested wisdom do you rely on? Are there areas where you might be too quick to abandon traditional approaches in favor of new trends? How might applying the Lindy effect change your decision-making process? Remember, the goal isn't to never try anything new. Innovation and progress are important. But by understanding the Lindy effect, we can make more balanced decisions, combining the wisdom of the past with the possibilities of the future. As we come to the end of our exploration of Nassim Nicholas Taleb's Skin in the Game, let's take a moment to recap the key insights we've discussed and consider their broader implications. We started by examining the crucial concept of skin in the game, the idea that those who make decisions should bear the consequences of those choices. We saw how the absence of skin in the game creates perverse incentives and hidden risks in many areas of our lives, from finance and business to politics and academia. Next, we delved into the asymmetry between risk and reward, exemplified by what Taleb calls the Bob Rubin Trade. We explored how this asymmetry can lead to reckless behavior and the accumulation of hidden fragilities in our systems. Finally, we discussed the Lindy effect and its implications for survival and decision-making in an uncertain world. We saw how the age of ideas and practices can serve as a powerful heuristic for their value and robustness. Taken together, these ideas offer a profound challenge to many of our contemporary assumptions about risk, decision-making, and the organization of society. They suggest that many of our current structures and institutions may be far more fragile than we realize, precisely because they separate decision-making from consequence-bearing. But Taleb's insights aren't just a critique, they also offer a path forward. By realigning incentives, ensuring decision-makers have skin in the game, and respecting the wisdom embedded in time-tested practices, we can build more robust, ethical, and ultimately successful systems. For business leaders, this might mean rethinking how you structure incentives in your organization. How can you ensure that decision-makers at all levels have a genuine stake in the long-term success of the company? How can you balance innovation with respect for time-tested practices? For investors, it might mean looking beyond flashy projections and impressive credentials to consider the actual track records of those managing your money. Are they investing alongside you, or simply collecting fees regardless of performance? For policymakers, it could involve finding ways to tie the personal outcomes of politicians and bureaucrats more closely to the long-term effects of their decisions. How can we create systems where those in power bear more of the consequences of their choices? And for all of us as individuals, Taleb's ideas invite us to take a hard look at our own decisions and actions. Are we taking genuine risks in pursuit of our goals, or trying to reap rewards while transferring risks to others? Are we too quick to abandon traditional wisdom in favor of the latest trends? How can we ensure we have skin in the game in the things that matter most to us? These are challenging questions and there are no easy answers. But by grappling with these ideas, by striving to align our actions with their implications, we can work towards creating a world that's more robust, more ethical, and ultimately more successful. As we close, I want to encourage you to dive deeper into these ideas. Skin in the Game is a rich and complex book, and we've only scratched the surface in this episode. Consider picking up a copy for yourself. You'll find a link to purchase it in the episode description. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you see these ideas playing out in your own life and work? What challenges do you see in implementing them? Share your insights in the comments or reach out to us on social media. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of skin in the game. Until next time, keep reading, keep thinking, and keep striving to build a better world, one decision at a time. Before we sign off, I want to remind you of something crucial. The ideas we've discussed today aren't just abstract concepts. They have real, practical implications for how we live and work. So here's my challenge to you. Over the next week, pay close attention to the decisions you make and the systems you interact with. Look for instances where there's skin in the game or where it's notably absent. How does this affect behavior and outcomes? Then choose one area of your life where you can increase your skin in the game. Maybe it's in your work where you could tie more of your compensation to long-term outcomes. Maybe it's in your investments where you could align your portfolio more closely with your actual beliefs about the future. Or maybe it's in your personal relationships where you could make more concrete commitments to the people you care about. Whatever you choose, take action. Because remember, as Taleb emphasizes throughout the book, it's not what we say that matters, it's what we do, especially when we have something to lose. If you found value in today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your feedback helps us reach more people with these important ideas. And don't forget, the link to purchase Skin in the Game is in the episode description. It's a book that rewards multiple readings, and I highly recommend diving deeper into Taleb's ideas. Thank you for listening to CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep putting your skin in the game.